Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and I want to talk about, was the 2023 Manic Panic, referred to as some as the OGL controversy of January 2023, was it good for Dungeons and Dragons? I'm not going to bury the lead. Yes, I think, in my humble opinion, it was, which is shocking. All right, so a little bit of history. 2023 Manic Panic. Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, says, we want to change the OGL. The Dungeons & Dragons community has a portion of the Dungeons & Dragons community comes out and says, we want to end Dungeons & Dragons. You want to change the OGL, we want to end Dungeons & Dragons. And this is incredibly frustrating to me. There are revisionists right now. I think that Teos Abadia is a revisionist. Sean Merwin is a revisionist. Ginny D is a revisionist. Ted from Nerd Immersion is a revisionist. Professor Dungeon Master is a revisionist. They all tell the same story, and what they don't tell you is that a portion of the Dungeons & Dragons community, mostly OGL 1.0 supporters, and the OSR and the ORC, the Open Role-Playing Game creatives that came out of the Pathfinder segment, right? Mostly a Pathfinder push there on the ORC, in my humble opinion. There was a portion of them that said D&D be gone, and they echoed the 1983 Satanic Panic. In 1983 Satanic Panic, passionate 1980s American evangelical Christians said D&D be gone. In 2023, the same thing happened. A group of OGLers, OSRs, and orcs came out and said, we promise to end D&D forever. Exactly the same promise that happened in the 1983 Manic Panic, right? So that's the real history, right? Now, if you can go get the same story, right? And I'm telling you a story of threat. I think that the OGLers, the OSRs, and the orcs threatened the very existence of Dungeons & Dragons in 2023, exactly the way the 1980 American evangelical Christians threatened the existence of Dungeons & Dragons in the 1983 Satanic Panic. Now, all those revisionists, they'll tell you a different story, and they're like, the Hasbro didn't have the right to change this legal document that they owned, right? And they were unfair to the community. And the community advocated. And then Hasbro responded, right? And it's a story of advocacy. I think it's a lie. In my humble opinion, it's a lie. And the only thing changed because of threat, okay? So there's this difference in history, right? I think I have the true history. Those people on the other side, I think they have the true history. I think they're revisionists and they're lying through their teeth. They would tell you that I'm wrong, right? So it's where we landed, right? Let's get to the interesting part, okay? Because that part's over, right? It's done. It's history. It's literally history, right? Let's get to the interesting part. Did it help Dungeons & Dragons? It did. Right? You're like, wait a second. People threatening the existence of Dungeons & Dragons helps Dungeons & Dragons? Yes, in my humble opinion, it does. It's shocking. It shouldn't. And if you read the book Freakonomics, it's going to say sometimes the math is hard to realize, right? Like sometimes you do the math and it's hard to tell, and it's hard to face the truths the math show, right? So here's the thing, right? Dungeons & Dragons truly is an IRL abstraction model of real life, and one of the things is it's not just in the game. It's literally the history of the game, right? Of Dungeons. It's the history of the tabletop role-playing game experience that is Dungeons & Dragons, right? So I don't know if you know this, but like every year in the forests in California, and it's been worse the last few years, the forest burns, right? It burns like crazy, right? And thousands of trees burn, thousands of animals burn, thousands of sage brushes burn, thousands of tumbleweeds burn. It all burns, right? Guess what? The soil is richer the year after, right? Because all these nutrients from that burning go into the ground, and that ground is a richer soil and grows more robust plants than if there had not been that disruption, right? So that's the thing, is basically the OSE, the Old School Essentials, the Dungeon Crawl Classics, and the Pathfinder, right? Nobody hates them and nobody loves them, right? And that's the issue, is Dungeons & Dragons benefits from, in my humble opinion, from love and hate. Nobody cares enough about old school essentials. Nobody cares about Dungeon Crawl Classics. Nobody cares about Pathfinder enough to love it or to hate it, right? And what we realize now in America is hate is an energy, right? And basically it activates. So these people, these haters, they activate an alternative good. I am activated. I used to be a dungeon master, right? Now I'm a Dungeon Dragon Sentinel, right? I am looking. Dungeon Master is just a nested. It's just a nested title, a nested role, a nested action for me, right? And when I Dungeon Master, I don't Dungeon Master so that everybody at my table has a good time. I Dungeon Master protect Dungeons and Dragons and say every purchase I make from Hasbro, every game I run, every session I run, every campaign I run is protecting this beautiful, shining, precious thing that groups come on the regular to destroy. Not to change, not to preserve, not to celebrate, to destroy from top to bottom, to literally or digitally burn the books. There are groups who understand that the existence of Dungeons and Dragons is dangerous to them. And it is, because it brings forward a world where Manifold Sentience is real, in my opinion. It brings forward a world where we have this incredibly powerful IRL abstraction modeling engine, right, that can be used for human flourishment. And nothing else on the market even comes close. Nothing else on the market even comes close or has the ability to accomplish anything that Dungeons & Dragons is able to accomplish. And these old school Essential fans and these Dungeon Crawl Classic fans and these Pathfinder fans, they're never going to move forward as long as the real exists, right? They're always going to lose. And that's where I'll end this, right? What actually happened, right? The OGLers are, how dare you try to change the OGL? What happened? Hasbro roundhouse kicked, virtually, Paizo, right? And Paizo would be ridiculously foolish to publish anything under the OGL ever again, right? It'll go under Creative Commons now, right? And so the reality is, if you look carefully, it's very clear. Hasbro literally killed the OGL, crushed it. No one will ever use it again, right? The only use for the OGL now is to count fools, right? Like, because you have way more freedom and way less things that you have to print in your book if you just use the Creative Commons. So basically, Hasbro just roundhouse kicked all the OGLers, OSRs, and orcs. And I watch a lot of UFC, and I can tell you, the only way a UFC fighter can roundhouse kick somebody is if they're dealing with somebody who doesn't even know the basics, and that's the difference here. That is the absolute difference. That is the difference. Is you arrive at a place where basically Hasbro is fighting an opponent who doesn't even know the arena where the fight is happening, and it could just literally roundhouse kick them and finish the fight like that. Right? It's so beautiful. It was beautiful to watch in a lot of ways, right? Because the reality is, like, you could see there were a lot of people on OSC, DCC, Pathfinder who was getting excited and think they had real momentum. All that momentum, it's like the balloon popped with a single pan, right? And the release of the SRD under Creative Commons, and I just watched Nerd Immersion. Ted from Nerd Immersion did this whole, he's doing a Black Flag Friday, and he spent the entire time just like saying, this still matters, please realize this still matters, it's not just us copying. And it's like he's begging, right? You can hear it. And I'm starting to feel a lot better about what happened, because I'm realizing, if you look closely, what really happened with the 2023 Manic Panic was that Hasbro just utterly roundhouse-housed the OGLers, the OSR, and the orcs. Absolutely devastated and 100% killed the OGL. And people didn't even recognize it. They didn't even recognize what happened, right? And then at the same time, we get to see the wolves, right? So before, we were all just one herd, right? And everybody assumed that they were the sheeps. Who are the wolves? I think Ted from Nerd Immersion, he's a wolf. That dude hates D&D. He's covering it. He despises it, right? Ginny D, I think she might be a wolf. I really do. I don't think she knows in her heart if she's a wolf or a sheep, right? But the reality is, you get to slink back, right? All these people were like, "Oh, I hate D&D," and then they're like, "Oh, I did a week of covering anything but D&D, and I got 10% of the regular views. I'm just gonna slink back," right? These are the wolves. The slink backs are the wolves, right? Who's a sheep? I'm a sheep. I think you're a sheep, right? And I understand it sounds cool to be a wolf, right? But the reality is, and it is cool to be a wolf, but it's not cool to be a wolf that wears a sheep's clothing, right? Be what you are, right? And that's the other thing we learned, is we learned who everybody really was. There's anti-D&D and there's D&D. Every word of that is my humble opinion. That new beard shave looks pretty good. Please consider liking, subscribe. Have a wonderful millennium.